Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this evening in adjournment proceedings to pursue a question that I asked on June 19th before this House adjourned on the summer recess. I'm very pleased that this question that I raised then allows me to return to an issue of fundamental importance to my constituents. I hold, Mr. Speaker, 9 separate town halls twice a year in my riding, and the last series of town halls, again, as one would expect, the question of the threat of supertankers loaded with bitumen and diluent, the threat of twinned pipelines from northern Alberta to Kitimat, and again the other project, the one that would take pipelines expanded to Vancouver for more bitumen and diluent coming out of Vancouver harbour, are top of mind for my constituents. In any case, Mr. Speaker, the question I asked of the Prime Minister on June 19th was whether the Prime Minister would be prepared to force the Enbridge project down our throats if the province of British Columbia continued to oppose it. When you look at the constellation of opposition to the Enbridge project, the risky twinned pipeline bringing from Kitimat to Alberta a toxic fossil fuel condensate called diluent to be stirred into a solid called bitumen to bring that out the other side. 2 different sets of tankers, Mr. Speaker, one set bringing diluent and leaving, another set of supertankers collecting dilbit mixed with bitumen and leaving offshore. The entire scheme poses unacceptable risks to British Columbia. And that's why at this point, and when I speak of the constellation of opposition, you really can't call it protests. We're talking about the province of British Columbia itself, Environment Minister Mary Pollock immediately on the NEB decision, and the cabinet of this country approving the project said no way, our conditions still aren't met. But that's not the only opposition. The Union of British Columbia Municipalities and, of course, First Nations and the majority of British Columbia residents. Now, when I asked the question about forcing it down our throats, I was thinking specifically of the fact that this particular Prime Minister signed a rather famous letter in 2001. It's generally referred to as the Alberta Firewall Letter. At the time, the Prime Minister was president of the National Citizens Coalition, and he signed it as the top signatory, immediately followed by Tom Flanagan and then others from Alberta. And what they wrote, Premier Klein, was this, quote, "It is imperative to take the initiative to build firewalls around Alberta, to limit the extent to which an aggressive and hostile federal government can encroach upon legitimate provincial jurisdiction." Now, this was the essence of my question, Mr. Speaker, and the Parliamentary Secretary from the Minister of Natural Resources who answered it at the time evaded this fundamental question of federal provincial jurisdiction and conflict. And the question that many British Columbians want to ask this Prime Minister and his cabinet is, how far will you go to push a project that British Columbians have rejected? Now, since the time I asked that question, we've had the substantial development of the Supreme Court of Canada decision in the Chilcotin case. I think I may be the first member of Parliament to speak to that here at the very last day of September, because the decision came down in the summer. What a phenomenal decision. What a clear statement. The First Nations title is what it is, its title. And it's not just a matter of consultation. It's actually a matter of First Nations having the right to say, no, we will not allow our land to be destroyed. Under the circumstances, when will the current government admit that the Enbridge project they have approved will never be built?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, our decision is based on the conclusions of an independent, science-based review panel. After carefully reviewing the independent regulator's recommendation on Northern Gateway, the government accepted the recommendation to impose 209 conditions to ensure this project meets the highest safety standards. The panel heard from nearly 1,500 participants in 21 communities and reviewed 175,000 pages of evidence prior to making their recommendation. This is another step in the process. It will now be up to the proponents to demonstrate to the regulator and Canadians how it will meet those over 200 conditions. It will also have to apply for regulatory permits and authorizations from federal, provincial, and municipal governments. And finally, consultations with First Nations communities are required under many of the conditions as part of the process for regulatory authorizations and permits. It also must fulfill its commitments to engage with First Nations and communities along the route. It's clear that the proponent has much work to do. As a government, we have promised Canadians that projects will only move forward if they are safe for Canadians and safe for the environment. That's the guiding principle for our plan for responsible resource development. We've introduced a suite of measures to enhance pipeline and marine safety. Whether we're transporting energy by rail, tanker, or by pipeline, our safety systems are world-class. The safety record of federally regulated crude pipelines is indeed 99.999%, and our government is taking action to improve our record even further. Our overall goal is to prevent incidents from occurring at all. And in the unlikely event that an incident does occur, we must have robust and transparent emergency preparedness and response plans. We've backed this up with enhanced liability regimes to show industry that we're protecting the environment, and we're doing it very seriously. Mr. Speaker, we also recognize that Aboriginal peoples must be full partners in everything we do, from ensuring the safety of our pipeline system to protecting our marine environment from incidents and sharing in the benefits of developing our resources. In his report, Douglas Eiford made a number of recommendations to build a better relationship with Aboriginal peoples. He said that Canada must take decisive steps to build trust with Aboriginal Canadians, to foster their inclusion into the economy and advance the reconciliation of Aboriginal people in Canadian society. And our government agrees. We're moving forward with a suite of activities to enable Aboriginal peoples to fully participate in the development and operation of our energy infrastructure projects, including our tanker and pipeline safety systems. With the participation of First Nations and our commitment to world-class pipeline safety systems, we're confident that Canada can capture the tremendous economic promise before us. We can diversify our energy markets and ensure prosperity for all Canadians for generations to come. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Health has stayed late here tonight to speak to this. But I do think when Rule 37 was written, it was never intended or contemplated that the Minister and Parliamentary Secretary brought forward to respond to a question would be those who carry other portfolios. I've worked so positively with the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Health that I'm sorry to see her here tonight forced to read notes from another Parliamentary Secretary in a different portfolio, because her talents are better spent on health. As it is, I will briefly respond that the key question I continue to pursue in adjournment proceedings is one of respect for provincial jurisdiction and for the federal government finding a way not to push forward. This independent review, so-called, is actually lacking in any analytical review of the evidence actually before it, and failed utterly to put forward the economic case on which it rested its decision. In this case, the Emperor has no clothes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I'm surprised to hear the member opposite seek to pigeonhole a colleague. I would have expected something a little bit more generous from her. But allow me to return to the debate before us and to speak specifically to energy supply. Few countries in the world have the enormous potential that Canada holds. We're the world's 5th largest producer of oil and gas and the 5th largest producer of natural gas. Canada is fortunate to have abundant oil and gas resources, but to reach our full potential, we need more than supply. We need to diversify our markets. And we've been clear that projects will move ahead only if they are safe for Canadians and safe for our environment. Thanks, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Comme il est 19h50, la Chambre s'adjourne jusqu'à demain à 14h, conformément à l'article 24.1 du règlement.